information influences our capabilities, our opportunities, our interests, and our potential. But we are not in control of this information and are influenced by those who control it. The movement is underway to move these controls and influence to the user. What is possible when we are connected and in control? This is the quest. This is the emergence.
Welcome to The Emergence, a podcast asking the question, what is possible when we are connected and in control? Today, I'll have my good friend Tim McLain on the show to discuss the role and the future of the connection as it relates to discovery and how it could provide fuel to tap into human potential. I first met Tim back in 2005 when I was looking to put up or shut up about the ideas I've been yapping about since the late 90s. What grew from this was a company called Quired.com, which was launched with Tim's friend and now my friend Dwight Pepper as well. The company was doomed from the start when I came up with the tagline of moving people forward, which framed the company into chasing an idea more than a business model. After years of building a video production company, video network, social platform, application framework, and website portal, we all ended up going our separate ways, and I retreated to the safety of a 9-to-5 job only. Although the company never took off, I cherish every minute we were in the hunt and continue to reference my long conversations with Tim on what could be possible with the tool set that was arriving on the market. Tim is an unconventional mind, which brings out the best in my train of thought when we get together. So I couldn't wait to bring him onto the show to share some of the ideas we have on harnessing technology to tap into human potential. Ideas that seem impossible to scale in the noisy, centralized marketplace we see today. But the purpose of the emergence is to create awareness by bubbling up ideas to cut through the status quo. There are people out there who are hungry for tools to take advantage of our highest common denominator rather than the lowest. Tools that are not under the control of business or governments to influence our perspective and interests. These tools are not going to be imagined or built by the people to scale to the Googles, the Facebooks, or the Microsofts, because they will always scale to the interest of the providers. Now, these tools will come from people with new ideas to scale to the interest of the consumers and the stakeholders. This is what is on the horizon, and I believe this conversation will serve as a reminder there are many, many, many other people out there looking to do the same thing who have had the funding and the consumer interest could truly begin to build tool sets to empower the user over the provider. So without further ado, let's dig in, and I'm going to bring on my good friend, Tim McLain, to unpack these ideas around the connection and better discovery tools. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Hey, Paul. Doing well. How are you?
Oh, good. Just here talking about the emergence and all these ideas, and I'd like to really dig in. But before I really, as I said in my intro, we met around 2005. So what's your background? So what are you up to now? What's your background? What you got to where you are now?
Okay. Yeah. So, currently I am a full-time web developer for a company here in Louisiana, Ducksware. And for many years, I've done freelance work in various industries, development industry, a lot of video production, visual effects, animation, kind of a jack of all trades, and really what I think my real skill set is creative problem solving, and just that's led me all over the place, to be honest. But yeah, I have a degree in game art, and had just gotten that right when I met you way back when.
Yep.
And you really got me involved in kind of testing those problem solving skills and trying to figure out problems with code. And honestly, that's really taken me a long way in my life over the years, and just developing that skill set. And I don't really know where else to go in terms of my background. That's pretty much it. I've done all kinds of different things, worked on projects, built applications. I've done video production for large scale concerts.
Yeah, Joe Walsh, right?
Yeah.
I was there.
Fun.
That was so cool.
Yeah, that was a good time.
I
was just really happy you were able to make it out that day.
Yeah, you know what? Your animation. Let's not downplay your animation. Man, when I was when we were building Quired, I also consulted for Trigon and Arizona Contractor Center, and we had part of the Acquired banner. We built websites and we also did video production, and you did some animations for Trigon, which is really cool. So you have a big background in animation, and you're a illustrator. You have wonderful drawings. And I was always fascinated watching your work at the studio on some of these animations. You did a hockey thing and just, and let's not forget you're a musician and actively have a band, Drug Money, which is phenomenal. So you're kind of like a Renaissance man, right?
Well, I guess so, but it is what they say. I kind of feel like, jack of all trades, master's none. I just really, I focus in on something, and then I just put so much energy and effort into the learning whatever it is that I think I'm able to be successful in those areas. But I always am kind of feeling that don't have quite enough time to really focus on each of those things like I would like to. If that makes sense.
Oh, it does. Believe me.
I think that you understand where I'm coming from
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, but that's really part of the human condition, right? I mean, it's just we only have so much time and we have to make so much money to be able to have a quality of life. I'm debating that with my son, Vaughn. You know Vaughn. He's 19 now. And, that's the thing that with me is that I see this as part of us being part of this human condition and this journey we're on, and really what is the purpose of it all. And you're a perfect example of that, is that you've been able to express your talents in so many different ways, but there's only a limited amount of time. We have 24 hours a day, and you have to sleep, you have to eat, and you have to work. And I do see there's some really conventional things that are happening, right? I mean, a serious there's more or less a serious arc that's going on right now as quality of life, and really what I'm seeing, the connection. And I don't really like to necessarily just talk about the internet. It's a connection. It's these tools that connect us. And is it really getting, what are we supposed to have? Are we supposed to have quality of life or quantity of life? And who's directing it? And the things that we can really start to unpack some of these things that always struck me about you as soon as I met you way back then. You were very young back then. And it's just this unconventional way to think and what this connection could do to really serve us. And it's really, I think the thing I'm going to go with when the theme of discovery is quality of life. I mean, if we're working in the factory and we're just slaving to work to be able to express our labor for the means of the provider, and that's all that we're doing, and we don't have time to enjoy our life. And people could say, you know what, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can have more money and you can have more time. But I think it's beyond that. And I think that the way that the centralized connection has started to create this awareness of what's going on, because people are more aware that there's more out there, right? I mean, where do you think that we are on the what you see today versus what we saw 15 years ago?
Well, I definitely agree with you on the fact that people are aware. We found ourselves in a situation to where anything that exists, you can pretty much at the click of a button go and at least see it to some degree, right? There's video, photos, all these things that you really didn't have access to then, like in the infancy of the internet even, I think I'm part of the last generation that ever existed without the internet. So, I have something to compare before and after with, right? So when I was a kid, you couldn't do that. You couldn't just hop on the internet and just see what it looks like in Maui right now, or something like that. And I think in a lot of ways, this has had an odd effect that's different than what the original intention was. And because it's now that you can go and get more information about, let's just say it is that, I've never been to Maui, but I'd like to research it and get all this information about it and stuff. It kind of, in a lot of ways, I think it makes people have less desire to actually go there. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
Like it's in some ways taken away motivation. And I see it a lot in the younger generation, at least in my opinion. They're not quite motivated. And I've been trying to, probably the past 10 years, figure out what's going on there, because, you know, I've got a younger brother and he kind of finds himself in that age group. He's just coming into adulthood now. And it's not that he's not, it's not that he's not motivated. I don't know how to describe it. He's not aggressive about trying to go out. Like my sister and I, we were like very aggressive about just like getting into college, you know, learning to drive, like doing all the things that you do when you're a teenager. And he was just like, nah, not too interested in that stuff. And I've been trying to track it down, and that's kind of what I've come up with in my head, is that when your brain at a young age has been literally fed just so much information and has never had time to stop and process it, I think there is some kind of, I'm not saying it's a negative effect. I'm just saying the thought processes are different. And it's not just the younger generation. I don't want to be, I mean, it's happening, you know, globally across, you know, it's just becoming part of the human condition.
It is.
And it's, yeah, so
it's worrisome.
I guess that's, yeah.
Well, and
I don't want to be negative.
No, I know. And then, you know, we're both more solution oriented than problem oriented. And that can create its own unique set of problems, because when you're experiencing life as a solution person and everything is built around problems and the noisy network is about problems, it's hard to navigate. And the one thing that, as we're unpacking this, is that it seems to me it's the expectation of the quantity from the provider is stepping on the quality of the consumer and the stakeholder. And you know, Tim Berners-Lee, you know, I follow him, and I met him with a brief meet and greet, and he's very frustrated with where the web is going. And you know that I've been interested in Dougals Engelbart, who was the mother of all demos and built something called an NLS system before Tim Berners-Lee. And that system was more of a decentralized collaborative framework for people to work with, as opposed to more of a centralized distribution of technology. And, you know, Tim Berners-Lee is very frustrated with what has become from it. And, you know, go back when we were starting out was when Facebook barely was hitting. We were building a video network while YouTube had just started. So remember how excited I used to be about what was going to come from this? I mean, I would be like freaking almost doing backflips, like, oh my God, we're going to build. There's so many things are going to be built. And then you and I were just watching. It's like, oh, Jesus, not that. It just eroded into this tool for these providers to take our interest and monetize them. So it's more effective for these providers to monetize the quantity of our interactions than for us to be able to optimize the quality of our engagement. And with your brother, that's exactly it. And not to blame everything on the technology, because this stuff has existed for forever. But it seems like it's the amplification, and we haven't even got started. You know, when we talk about AR and VR and advanced AI, I mean, that's what worries me right now, is that we have seen nothing yet. You think that our attention is, you know, we're an attention economy. That's what it's grown to from the 70s on, is we are an attention economy. And attention is the oil, it's the water. And it's just a marvelous tool for the providers. I mean, really, when you think about it, it's a great way to monetize and make money off of. But what does it do for the consumer and the stakeholder? And that's kind of where I am right now. It's that quantity versus quality. And then how do we change that? How do we really move that in a more of a balance? Because I'm not saying that you have to take out quantity. I'm just saying the consumer and the stakeholder needs to have more of a balance with the business and the government. That's all I'm saying. So, in talking about that with Tim Berners-Lee, is that he imagined a web that was, he imagined a decentralized web. And then I was talking about Dougals Engelbart, you know, the NLS system that was, had been built prior to Tim Berners-Lee, where Dougals Engelbart had envisioned more of a collaborative network of computers. What Tim Berners-Lee had built more of a distributed model, and his level of frustration is what has come from that, from the providers really almost gamifying that connection. And that is, he's trying to build something with the solid pods. And actually, it was interesting with my conversation with Mark Nadal, the last episode, was the fact that he doesn't like the idea of the domain connection, as opposed to he wants a peer-to-peer. And that's another thing I want to mention about your background. You also have a background with database. So let's talk about that right now, because you listened to my conversation with Mark Nadal, and we're talking about, because we don't like to just focus on problems, you and I, we like to focus on solutions. So
Sure.
This connection, what are your thoughts about the fact of a database connection, peer-to-peer versus a domain connection? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, in an ideal world, a peer-to-peer connection would be great. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's really just depends on the type of problem you're trying to solve. I mean, in terms of the information being more freely available, and the types of situations where we see where you have providers that are in control of the information itself, right? They store it, they run the databases, they have all the servers. A centralized system is kind of what puts us in this situation we're talking about right now. They're a decentralized system. I mean, I just think that it works well if designed properly. And the concern there would be, in my opinion, is just making sure that the data is replicated enough across multiple nodes so that there's never any possibility that you couldn't retrieve your information that you needed.
Yes.
And that so sometimes that node-based structure is a great way to go, and other times it's not, and it just depends on application at the end. In terms of what we're talking about, I agree with Mark fully that that's kind of how you get around it. But we're just in a situation now to where all of these big providers, it's multiple layers of things. The internet's not just one thing, even though it might seem that way from the end user perspective. I'm Google. I control, where people are directed throughout the internet. I'm basically the yellow pages of the internet. If you need to find anything, you come to me type situation. It's not just Google though, it's like there's the browser layer, there's all of the telecommunications required in just making the network. Like all of those things play into it. And, what I understand from what Mark was talking about, the technology he's working on is more or less hijacks the browser. Maybe hijack's not a good word. Builds an extension
Yes.
on top of the browser to kind of put a layer on top of the pre-existing technology. And then I haven't had an opportunity to go and look any deeper in terms of technology-wise, like how that information gets stored on the client system instead of in the cloud somewhere. But maybe it sounds like I'm rambling.
No, you're not.
At the end of the day, I still think it's situational, and there are definitely going to be situations where a centralized type of storage data store would be better for certain things. It also comes into from a security standpoint and things like that. If there is some type of exploit that would happen in this open, decentralized type of thing, you're potentially dealing with millions of nodes that are infected instead of, one easy to try. Even if it's a cloud of 1,000 computers, they're generally all kind of managed from a single interface, for lack of a better way of describing it, or for looking for a simple way to describe it, that you can fairly easily patch. I don't know how that works with a decentralized system. In terms, like if something were to get security wise or data corruption or anything like that, it might be very difficult to, and that's more from a technical management end and less from a theoretical.
Yeah.
So I see there could be some problems that could arise that are outside of the utopian idea that it's just going to work.
Yeah, and that's an important part about that, the utopian vision, the theoretical versus the practical. And there's some things, I mean, all of it I'm suspect on. And in my intro, my first episode, I talk about I really intend to be the grain in the eye, sand in the eye of the of just the providers, because no matter who it is, I'm always cautious about the fact of they start out with good intentions. We saw that. We saw that when we were developing Quired. And it starts off with Facebook as a great way to connect people, and Twitter and Google. And then you start to see that there's controls that are being placed, and they're removing information. I mean, Google right now, I'm not a Republican, but they are taking out, YouTube is taking out clips that have to do with election fraud that are questioning it. And, I don't have a problem with flagging information whatsoever. I have a problem with removing information. And I've had this discussion with a number of people on the fact that these are private companies and they should be able to do this. Okay. So this is where this really starts to get into the really deep part of this. Is information a utility? Or is it something that is to be wielded by providers? And I think that in the next 20 to 30 years, I think we're going to have a very difficult conversation to where if we're going to make that next leap in societal progress, I just don't see how we maintain information as a vehicle for profit. Yes, you have libraries. Well, you have bookstores, right? And then the publishers make money. I'm not saying that publishers can't make money, but what it is that it's this centralized, it's like just a couple of people have their fingers in the transmission of information, to where you have books, you have publishers, or you have the authors, but the Twitters and the Facebooks and even the Googles, it's really starting to concern me. There's just too much control. And Javier, whenever I had that the Cybernetics episode, Javier, Livas, Cantu, he was talking about even the body has a centralized provider over the nervous system. And that really made me think about that. It's okay, there are reasons for centralization, but just because you have reasons for centralization doesn't mean, there's still autonomous parts of our body and our nervous system that work. So is that top tier government, or is it business? And see, my thing is where I've really been thinking about, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. I'd like to see technology develop that's more community based. And you have these little sub nodes all over the place. And Berners Lee on the Solid Pods, Mitzi Laszlo, who used to be a Solid Pod manager, had written an article talking about how they would divvy out these domains throughout the world, and possibly the UN being in control of that, which I personally have a problem with. But she also in her article talked about communities possibly being responsible for overseeing these domains. What are your thoughts on that, as far as the community side of it versus the business side versus the government side of being the ones that are responsible for managing the flow of this information?
Well, in general, I would say that if we're going to continue to go down the path of allowing privatized companies that house and store and control and manipulate this information and then distribute it as they choose, we're always going to continue to have problems, and we're going to sink deeper and deeper into the issues you're talking about. And to some degree, I feel like it has to happen from the community level. Just like a lot of things have to happen from the community level, because trying to even get the government, more of a national, federal, or even world government to make good decisions on how this should happen, it's just, at the end of the day, it's always going to get manipulated into something that is going to benefit the agenda of those people, right? So I even think a lot of the problems that we're having socially, and with the divide in ideologies and things like that, is because there's not enough interaction between people on a communal level. People aren't feeling like they're being able to make an impact. And I would think that in terms of the way to start to correct this problem would be that, people would actually have to start from the community level. It's more of a trickle up instead of a trickle down.
Yep.
The problem with that, though, is that how?
I know.
How do you, how do you get people? How do you even convince people that they need to do this? And I'm open to suggestions on that, but I do feel just in general, people are not acting inside of their sphere of influence, and we, as people who are technologists and people who have these ideas, need to really think hard and try to develop some form of technology that makes it easier for people to do these things that, on a more of a internal human experience, even spiritual level, to where they feel like they have the ability to do the things that they know inside of themselves that they need to be doing.
Brilliant. Absolutely. 100%. That is the idea behind the emergence and ant colonies that are outside the queen ant, that they're making decisions based off of things that will collectively protect them and help them. And, but here, the other side of that, anytime you say the word collective, you're going to have Marxist doctrine brought up. And see, this is a thing that I plan on actually taking these ideas and talking to people like you. And I really am going to work towards where I want to go all over the world. And I want to unpack these ideas with people, because there's people like you, people like me, that are really struggling with this, that are coming up with unique ideas. And that's what we have to do is allow it to breathe. We have to experiment. Not all these things are going to lead. And the notion that it's going to come to utopian resolutions, or it's going to come to Marxist authoritarian rule, is the problem. It doesn't have to be this zero-sum game. And that's where Mark Nadal talks about. That's why I like some of his thoughts on freeism. If you dig into that, it's pretty interesting. And he's clear, the fact that he's not, I could be wrong. That's what he says. And, but we need to be willing to experiment with this and this whole thing. Cause I want to have a Marxist on the show. I want to have a full blown capitalist on the show. I want to have anarcho syndicalist, an anarcho capitalist. I mean, we can't be afraid to dig into the weeds, because we've got, it's got to be about what's internally inside of us. And cause you just nailed it, is a connection like your brother. Maybe we can use that thought experiment, is what resides inside your brother that really truly makes him happy and interested. And if he had that validation, if he had a point of validation, he hooked up with somebody, whether remotely through the web or, somebody next door, and he does something, they say, you know what? That's pretty darn good. What else could you do? They're not saying, oh, you're the best thing in the world, but I mean, I'm interested in you. I'm interested in that specific thing that's inside you. And then that little piece allows your brother to say, you know what, maybe that is something I can do. Maybe I'm something good at. But when we're in these silos that are influencing They're not digging deep. They're not freaking. They don't give a flying rat's ass. I'm sorry to generalize that, but that's the way I'm starting to see this. Is that they want to skim the surface so that we can be optimized for quantity, as opposed to really digging deep. And that's what Dougals Engelbart was experimenting with the NLS system. And I've read that what killed the NLS system was the birth of the PC, because he had engineers working for him. And they just said they wanted to go the route of the PC because that was going to be for personal. It's all about the individual. But his point was, yeah, but it's about the individual, but it's about the connection too. So at that time, the PC, in the 70s, didn't have that connection, and they wanted to really push the ability of the strengths of this computer operating system to be able to localize you and make you more effective. But what Engelbart wanted to bring was a collaborative system to connect these terminals together. If you go look at his mother of all demos, I mean, it's right there. I mean, they're collaborating real time in 1968 on documents and on very specific specific paragraphs that they're interacting with them. It doesn't exist. I still have a hard time sublinking on content. And we had conversations way back on the fact of sub-addressing video links, and we wanted to build that with Quired. I don't know if you remember that conversation. We were going to that trade show and yep. Talking about, YouTube is doing some of that, but they're not really. It's just this overall opaque connection, as opposed to really digging deep inside to what resides within your brother to be able to experiment and find out so that he can move himself forward.
Right. And you're 100% correct. I mean, and even more, literally than figuratively, like with my brother, as an example, he, like I said, he's entering his adulthood. He doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life. He just doesn't know. He went to maybe 2 semesters of college. He's working, he's doing fine. He's just existing. And just recently, I mean, within the past month, we were hanging out and he was like, "Hey, look, one of my friends saw some of my drawings and they said they're pretty good. And I was wondering if you had any advice for me to get better at drawing." And I was like, "Oh, brother." Yeah.
That's a sweet spot. Tim McLain right there.
I've got a life, my 37 years worth of knowledge to pass on to you about how to get better at drawing. So how about we start getting together, once every couple weeks, and we'll just draw and I'll give you information. I'll unload everything I got. And that's the most connected we've ever been. There's a huge age differential. Maybe I should point that out because people don't know. My brother's 18 years younger than me. So all the time that I was working with you in Arizona and going to college and, trying to get my footing as an adult, he was just a little baby.
Yep.
And, so we've not really had that quality time, but he, when he asked, it went off like a light went off, and I was like, that's it. That's our connection. And it's been great. I've had so much fun just hanging out with him and drawing and showing him books and ways to, it was, and we need technology that does that.
Yep. And that's as simple as that. And just think about that. There's somebody too, in addition to you, there's somebody in India, there's somebody in Nebraska, there's somebody in Pakistan, there's somebody in, Siberia that could tease that same interest out of your brother. And, and more importantly, if he was able to think about this, you've got this virtual connection, but that virtual connection now is resonating within him. And now when he goes into the cafe locally, in Louisiana, and he meets somebody, he's bringing that virtual, the quality of the of that virtual connection and the validation he's receiving from it. And now he takes that to the real world. Because that's the thing. Technology is not and cannot replace the real world. It needs to augment us to make us more fully appreciate what is specifically what is around us, the beauty of what is around us. And I'm an optimist because the world is beautiful. It's the communication that's noisy. And the one thing that I want to bring up while it's fresh in my mind here is that, okay, we have these containers of information floating in the ether. All right. And now they're basically hunkered down into silos, in about 7-8 silos that's controlled by about 7-8 companies that have agreements with the FCC on and how the wireless spectrum is allocated. So, but imagine breaking apart all these containers because they're just on websites. They're on connected to domains, or they're connected in computers like Nadal's. All right, they're just containers of information. You've got your container. I've got my container. Toothpaste has its container. GM has its container. Now, what is the possibility of, okay, right now we have 4 or 5 algorithms and AI that are actually helping us discover what's within those containers. I argue, and I touched on that in my intro, is that why not have our own personalized algorithms that we can tune? And we talked about this. We remember our Da Vinci conversations way the hell back. And that's a great one. I always remember that. But Michael Shale coming in and saying, well, what about fractals? And we're just like, whoa, think about that. Matter of fact, I can't wait for you to hang out with Michael again. I just hung out with him again. What a wonderful guy.
I love Michael.
Yeah. And so, our personal algorithms, our personal AI to dig into these containers. Your brother dug into your container and found the things that validate him. He reached inside that container, and it just so happened with that conversation, because he had to ask. Why did he ask? I mean, really, what brought him there? And that's the decentralization. You still have the centralized forces of managing the containers, but they're all broken apart and they're accessible from ourselves. And then we just don't have an algorithm or a AI. It's something that's tunable. It's something that we learn from our own. But Facebook is not tuning that for us. Facebook it could be the skin. Facebook should be the skin. Google should be the skin. We need to be able to have access to, and we can paint these pictures. And let's go to this, because let's go down that rabbit hole, Tim. Because colors. How do we paint?
Sure.
The spectrum of who we are in these containers. So let's I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, I do think back to all of the different conversations we've had on this over the past 15 years. And the one that I find, the one that resonates in my mind the most is when we were talking about tuning and having some sort of filtering technology. And in my mind, it just looks like a mixing board. But yeah, you basically, in the real world, we have, and I say in the real world versus the digital world, we have all these different types of signals. Basically, we have light, we have sound, and these things break down into measurable frequencies of things. And I think that if we could start to make associations with pieces of information as to how they relate to things like certain pitches or certain colors, and the key point here is that the relationship would have to be how a person perceives this thing, because we have to keep in mind that the literal thing that I see when I see the color blue might be different in your experience.
Yep.
Right. So what you see when you see blue, we're both seeing blue, but what I see as red might actually be what you see as blue. If I were able to actually get inside of your skin and walk around, I don't know, but there's something unique about the way that you see blue compared to the way that I see blue. And if we can make a tool that could help us start to feed, almost like, when you interviewed Javier and he talked about the feedback loop.
Yes.
And what a real world feedback loop is. If we had tools that allowed us to, now we have tools that are like, hey, here's this thing. Do you like it? If you like it, give it a thumbs up. And if enough people give it a thumbs up, it becomes popular, and it goes in the queue of, in general, the masses like this thing, and here's a couple of words that it's related to, and you like some other things related to those words. So since so many people like this one, this is the one we're going to shove down your throat. But what it really needs to be, in my opinion, is we ran this through an AI learning system that figured out that all the pixels in this movie sum up to be 3 basic colors. And over time, you've liked a bunch of images that also relate to these same colors. And we're going to show you this film now because we think that emotionally it's going to do something for you just because of the way it looks. Auditorily, you could do the same thing. Now, of course, there would have to be it has to be more advanced than that. It would definitely have to take into consideration things that you like, things, or not, and it shouldn't always be about what you like. It should be about what you need to see, what you need to learn. That's another problem with
yes, that is
the current type of AI that only feeds you one-sided information. That's real bad. That's really bad.
Well, and the color is the one thing, right? So that was when we were talking about this 15 years ago, is the one element. Because, maybe I was swaddled with my mother in a blue cloth, and that really sticks with me in blue. And my favorite color is blue. And, that'll bring up emotional triggers for me. And there's words. There's another thing we're working on, that you and I have been kind of collaborating on, the word explorer concept. We have a company we have individuals in Virginia that are interested in building out technology to help people discover movies that will fulfill them more effectively, that moves them. And you were just talking about it is not only what we like. Because we were working on kind of the beginning stages of an algorithm talking about the word divorce. And, just because it's a movie that is about divorce, it could be a movie that actually teaches you to cope with divorce. And, somebody going through a divorce, somebody would think, well, that's the last thing you would want to watch is a movie about divorce. You're going through a divorce. Yeah. But what if it's something that has all these little trigger points inside that there's words. And that was a thing that I was interested in exploring is, through RDF, resource descriptive framework, triads and things like that, to find combinations of words that would be able to help you align your own internal behaviors, nature and nurture, things that you've gone through, and then help align that to be able to help you cope. It's not only to help you be happy, because happiness only is through the challenges of sadness, right? And we don't even know happy if we haven't been sad. So I think the web as it works today, the technology works today, just is on that binary happy sad thing. It's not in the nuances of what really drives us as a human being. And it's playing to our lowest common denominator. So if you had a tool set that was able to take these words and you're able to paint that like a freaking, like Da Vinci, that was a thing, one of our algorithms we were working on way back in the day. If you were able to then paint this and you were able to go and grab a palette and colors that makes you feel this particular way, and you add that into your cue, and then series of words that you pick from this cue, and then all of a sudden you save that as your profile, and video and audio and text that comes up in the future, some things aren't really good. One day may be different than another, but maybe you have these other sub filters that actually help you then find the content and find the people that really are the ones that are going to help you move forward. But like you said, it's not only on what's going to make you happy, it's also going to make you how you can cope with all the shit that we deal with every day. Everybody deals with it. The richest person in the world and the poorest person in the world. We all deal with just the vagaries and the crap. And so, the colors is an important part. And, there's all these different metrics, these different points that we could take to help us really relate, because then once it's pulled out of us and it's validated, then we're moving.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's the experience that we get to have, as little as we understand about it, it's vast. And part of it, if you think of it in like the Jungian sense, is part of it is just dealing with your shit. Part of it is knowing that you're flawed and eventually being able to love the part of you that is not the best part of you. Mm-hmm. And it takes a lot of, it's not easy. Let me say that.
Life is not easy.
Be willing.
Yep.
Life is not, if you're going to live a whole meaningful life, a lot of it's not going to be easy, and a lot of it's not going to be pleasant. And we need in the distribution of information to stop telling people the opposite. Mm-hmm. There's been a mental shift to where people feel like things are supposed to just be easy. And what it is like everything is kind of easy.
Yep.
There's not a huge struggle. Like what do you need? You can order groceries on Amazon. They'll just bring them right to your house. It's crazy, like how easy it actually is. So, for me, I find my struggle in the types of things we're talking about right now. How do we solve this problem? I feel like this is a big problem, and I feel like so many people are unhappy and mentally unwell because of always being fed information that keeps them from addressing that shadow, as Jung called it,
Yep.
And we need our algorithms to take those things into consideration.
Yeah. And
I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this thing that is, the challenges. Back when we were first forming Quired, I had a friend that I used to work with, and I was at a party talking to him, and I was trying to lay out some of these ideas about being able to allow people to paint their own picture. And he goes, people aren't going to want to do that. It's too much work. And so I was arguing with him, and I thought, this is going to be my lifelong freaking, quest or a problem of trying to get through to people. Because if we want to have better information, I'm sorry, we're going to have to do a little bit more work. I mean, because the easier it is, the more that it's going to be controlled outside of our own interest. And now I'm not saying to make it difficult. I'm talking about making it intuitive, but not intuitive from the provider's perspective, intuitive from the consumer and the stakeholder's perspective. And there was something that I was working with on my intro is about the police and what, with George Floyd and what went down there. And, and this is something I'm working on an episode about the potential of labor. And, you think about that, the police department, the police training, the software that's used for the police training department. And anybody that is out there that hears this, I would love to talk to a police department that is utilizing technology that's bettering their relationships between their police officers and the communities. And then let's find out what's working and then spread that around. Because if a police department is acquiring communication technology and training technology, where are they getting it from? Are the police officers part of the process of identifying and using this technology? Or is it coming from the union? Or is it coming from an administrative council? And then or should it come from the community? Should the community stakeholders that are being, are interacting with the police, shouldn't they be the ones to help build or identify the technology that's going to help their police officers relate to and align with the interest of the community more effectively? So whenever they're coming up with a situation where somebody walks away, that they have a better understanding. And, are the police trained daily? I mean, all day long on the fact of these different situations per community that are happening. And see, that's the centralization versus the decentralization. Is if this software is acquired and the software is only speaking to the interests of the providers, then what do you think we're going to get from it when it's actually deployed? So are we going to get it? And what happens when the police aren't aligned with the communities? What's going to happen? It's going to create more noise. And then the police officers are going to be seen and they're going to be painted as all bad, and which is happening, which I fundamentally don't believe in. Are there bad elements? Absolutely. But I think it's bad systems. I think it's bad training that could be used to be able to make a more of an effective relationship between the people of the communities and the police officers themselves, not the police chiefs and not the heads of the departments. I'm talking about the police officers. What kind of stake? They're the freaking stakeholders. They're the one putting themselves out on the line. And the people that are on the streets are the ones that are, when they go out and buy bread, that they're putting themselves on the line. So what kind of voice do they have in building the technology that is going to serve both of them? And that's where I think that we're truly disconnected. We're lost in this.
I couldn't agree with you more. I've got a good friend who's I'm not going to reveal any personal information about him, but police officer, one of the greatest human beings I've ever met. And he's leaving the force. I mean, we're talking about a person who's was a Marine, did multiple tours in Iraq, was in Fallujah. His first son was born while he was in Fallujah. He's come back, worked hard as a beat cop. Outstanding human being. Made detective. Worked as a detective in Baton Rouge, which is one of the worst places you would ever want to. Just some of the things you're going to see there are just awful. I mean, murder after murder after murder. It's really bad. Has since moved out of Louisiana. Was detective in another smaller department. Eventually got another promotion to where he was actually at a school. And, teaching kids and just kind of being like a good, positive police presence at the school. And I mean, literally talked to him yesterday and he's like, I'm out.
Jesus.
I'm out. So, and what I'm trying to get at is he is outstanding. Every police officer should be like he is. And he should be somebody who gets to have a say in the training. And
Yep.
He's put the work in. I agree that the community should have something to say, but also they need to educate each other. It takes both.
Yeah. They're stakeholders. It's just kind of shareholder versus stakeholder. The big. It needs to come from deep within. And these police officers and these communities of individuals, and I'm not talking about getting around and singing Kumbaya. I'm talking about, so what's going on in the streets and what can we do? I mean, even the community side, the police officers, what can we do for you to realize what we're going through? Because, I'm not black, so I have no idea what it's like to drive a street and be pulled over for no reason. I don't know. This whole thing of blaming the victim and the victim blaming the other side is that it's about the fact of more understanding of what's going on. And again, not to sing Kumbaya, but to deal with the hard realities of life and use these tools to make us have a better alignment with each other and better understanding, so that we're fuller, that we're not fuller just from the technology, so that we're fuller, when that police officer meets that community member and, they have more of a respect of what that person's gone through and for the community member to have more respect for what the police officer has to go through. Is our technology playing on that, or is it playing on the noise? Is it really truly allowing us to get a better understanding? And that's my thing. That's what the emergence is what resides deep within us. That blue blanket that I was raised with my mother, that the words that were used, the experiences I've had, and if I've been called out because of the color of my skin or anything else. I mean, I'm short, so you know how many short jokes I've had in my life. Now it's absolutely nowhere close to what people of color go through. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that in parts in my brain when pretty much every day of my life I've had some, whether people are just being cool and funny, but those little things. And so those little things come inside your psyche and they build that nurture part of who you are. And then you have your environment. And so where you live, and if you're living in the ghetto, and if you're living in the ghetto and you have wonderful parents that raise you and then do the best to be able to protect you, versus you're living in the mansion in Beverly Hills and your parents are terrible. I mean, these nuances are difficult. But the technology does not play to the nuances. They don't play to the nature and nurture. It's just like this binary, opaque, let's just get you to believe that everything is going to be great so you can spend more money to get there. Buy more self-help books, or, that's another thing about LinkedIn. I said this to a guy a while ago. It's like, LinkedIn's like one big self-help book. And I'm actually, after Microsoft bought it, I'm just let down by it because they used to have some really great groups in there. And it's just, and I love self-help. There's no problem with that. But when you use that as an escape, it's like the self-help for escape. It's like, no, there's things inside of us. Let's build these tools to help mine our own better reality so that we can impart that with other people in our communities, so we can help build them up. Why do we want to take people down? Let's build, but for me to bring somebody else up, I need to be up myself. So I just think, and this is, we talked about this before about, Word documents, spreadsheets, and our websites. They're silos. They're just we should really build tools that are more open on the fact of it's an open protocol that you're able to open source, like the thing that I'd mentioned on one of my episodes, the fact that my tweet history. If I'm not happy with Twitter's algorithm and I'm not happy with what Twitter is doing, I should be able to take my entire history of Twitter and move it into another domain. And our information should be built to where it's exportable, and it's and all my all my instances of engagement, those are mine. Those are my experiences on Twitter. Right now they are, because I agree to their freaking 40-page terms of service. But in the future, for us to be able to explore our potential on this planet, we need to have better tools that allow us to be able to explore ourselves so that we can then explore others so that we can work better together. And not as some utopian dream, but some pragmatic reality of just what's the matter with better. I had a guy that was on with a social network, and he was saying he had a problem with better because it leads to people feeling that they are not good. And it's like, no, if we can at least serve the possibility of better, then we are screwed. It doesn't be best or perfect, just better. What's the matter with, trying to be better for our community and ourselves, and not being perfect. And then whenever we make mistakes, we learn from them, like the police officers, well, let's really look at what happened with this. And then let's learn how ourselves and systems can help us learn from it and be better at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first off, just on that last bit there, like, people have to stop being so sensitive. Like, we're not going to make any progress if I'm not saying that we need to be insensitive, but there's no possible way. Like, part of the way that we learn is through tough experience and finding humor in experience. Like, that's how we we share information. It's a way we share information. It's a way we build connections. And if you can't say anything and you can't, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm really
not an incredibly important one. Yeah.
I'm really concerned that our ability to even to build the connections that we need to build are stifled by, just a very, I'll just say it's a very strong sensitivity to anything that goes against any type of message that's being pushed. I'm not going to point out individual things.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say in general, if an agenda comes into play and it's like, this is the way you're either going to believe this or you're not going to believe it, or you're going to do this or you're not going to do it. It's really hard for there to be anything other than two opinions on that particular issue. And the technology that we need to build, or the technology that we need to have, is the one where, let's go back to the example of the police officer and the person in the community. It needs to be the one that finds the particular police officer and the particular community member that do have something that they can build upon.
Yes.
And then once those two make that connection and that person says, oh, this police officer is not bad, this is actually a really good guy, and the police officer does the same, I really like this guy, this is somebody I would hang out with outside of work, whatever their connection might be.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do with the color of their skin or anything else.
Nope. It's a human connection that gets made. Maybe they have different opinions on a million different topics, but for whatever that one thing that we're able to identify quickly.
Yep.
And that will spread through the community, because from that point, especially with a good piece of technology that makes it easy and actually promotes this type of behavior, now you're quickly building good relationships in any community. It could be a black community, could be a poor white community, could be a upper class community.
Absolutely.
They all need good relationships with the police force. A good line of communication would do things that would prevent people from doing things that put people like police officers who are out risking their lives and they're already on guard just because you have to be. If you knew that at any given time your ticket gets punched, you're going to be on guard, you're going to be a little more aggressive. And absolutely, they need better training. But really, it starts from good connections with people in the community, so they know that they can trust, and that will weed out the bad police officers right away, right?
Yep.
Because it'll get back once there's a friendship there, and somebody says, "Hey, I'm just going to let you know, police officer A, that police officer B is really coming around here doing some shady stuff. He's being overly aggressive, blah, blah, blah." That makes it something that at that point, that police officer A has the ability to do what he knows he needs to do and go talk to somebody higher up about police officer B.
Yeah, and there could be something, this is exactly what I wanted to talk to you, because I knew you were going to surface up some things I didn't think of. And it's that individual. So when you talk about, the sensitivities on some of these other things. So let's just use that, a white police officer and a black community member. And they find a really strong connection on a couple of things. And all the other things they don't agree with. They might not agree on politics. They might not know, the sensitivities on some of these other things are going to be outweighed by the strength of their connection. And as they continue, they might find more things that they actually have a common interest in, as opposed to focusing. And, there's things about sensitivity of calling a black person the N-word is just, there's just obviously that just boom. We're not talking about that type of sensitivity. We're talking about the nuances of people taking these things and focusing on it to where it's actually getting in the way of digging in and finding those common ground. The Democrat versus the Republican, and the liberals versus the conservatives. Like, there's so many. I've talked to people to where they think that conservatives are just the bane of all existence. Like, I grew up with conservatives. I'm not conservative, but my family, a lot of them, and friends are conservatives. Like, and the same thing that the conservatives will say the liberals are the bane of all existence. I know liberals. Come on, people. It's just this, it's ridiculous is what it is. We're all human beings. We've got human traits inside of us. That's why I want to talk to a Marxist. Now, I don't want to talk to I will be honest with you. I'm not going to have a Hitler carrying card member on the show. I'm just not going to do that. That's my prerogative. But I'll talk to any conservative if they're going to talk about not harming somebody, just like if it's a Marxist that wants to have bloody revolution, there's not going to be any common ground there. But if I'm going to talk about a Marxist about their ideas of empowering labor, hell yeah, I'm going to talk to them. Why wouldn't I? And if I could talk to a conservative about their argument for the ideas of self-empowerment and things like that, hell yeah. So it's digging deep inside and finding those common traits, like your brother found with your interest in art, that's able to translate back to him to validate some things that maybe he's good at, maybe that he can see. Because now maybe that community member with the police is going to see the police a little bit differently, because that one police officer is acting outside of what the centralized connection has told him what a police officer is. You know what I mean? It's
absolutely
this cake that we're all supposed to eat, that Marie Antoinette, told the people that they should eat when they're starving. It's really, that's where I'm getting to, where this centralized connection is let them eat cake. Seriously, we should be able to be more nuanced in that. But the thing is, we're not going to be able to be more nuanced unless we build these tools and we find the people and find the funding to build these tools. And maybe, one of my arguments of episode I'm working on, the potential of labor, is I believe we should bring in grants. And, if you're a company utilizing this technology to empower labor, to be able to help discover labor that's more in line with employers, then I think you should get a tax break. I think you should get a grant from, I'll pay my taxes to do that. That should be a part of my taxes, to be able to help people align their labor more effectively from what they have, their capabilities that reside with them. And then what are the needs that reside deep within the employer? Not employers. I'm not saying that employers are bad and labor are good. What I'm saying is that lack of connection, that alignment between the two. And I think that government can serve a role by not building the technology, but helping provide possibly subsidies or tax breaks, and maybe do away with all the generic tax breaks where Amazon doesn't pay any federal tax. And but that's a bigger my thing. And my thing is that on capitalism, I really have more of a flank attack to where you go into the inside and you're not destroying anybody, because I don't want to overthrow capitalism. I just want to make it more effective, to where the true ideas behind Adam Smith's and the Enlightenment thinkers, 200-300 years ago, what their true intent was. It was not this. I'm telling you that. It was not shareholder primacy. That was not his intent, Adam Smith intent. And it's just been bastardized. But what am I going to do? Say overthrow these, capitalist pigs? No, not at all. Is that let's build technology to dig deep inside these operations to help them find value of their labor. I don't think they're actually necessarily pushing down on labor. It's just the way that the system is, that it's based on profit. But maybe if you start to allow labor to kind of breathe inside these organizations, and people breathe outside of big organizations where they find things like your brother can find things that really, validate him, that he doesn't work for a big corporation or a big company. Maybe he's discovering art. But, for us to be more resonant with ourselves and allow the government and business enterprises to help fund these things or give breaks towards it to help it grow. I think that's the role of them, not to build it, but to help promote it.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I'm at a point to where I just feel like government in general is failing, at least in our country, just on all fronts. I just feel like the ball is just being dropped.
Yep.
And that in itself, I see technological solutions that should be put in place for accountability, if for nothing else. And, I think you and I both know that the powers that be don't want to have these things in place. And if they did,
it'd already be in place.
They'd already be in place. So that's the fight that we're fighting. And it's a good fight, and it's one that needs to be fought. But
I know,
it's a hard one.
It seems, and that's where I got from Mark Nadal. I gave him my ideas on the marginalized consumer. And he's like, I just don't see you changing that. And I agree with that. And I've actually been facing that on all my communities that I've been engaging with. But, I figure I have I'm 57. So I've got a good 20 years, 25 years of I'm going to fight for this. And I think the best fight is, maybe the government's not going to fund these things right away, but what if we find ways to just build these little experiments, and then you're able to show, because we can't just build these things. We've got to show how they're resonating within communities, how they're being effective, and that feedback loop, and cybernetics is how important feedback is in building proper systems. Is that if we're not able to monitor the progress of these applications, then it's not going to get any type of traction. But if say money was raised on some of these ideas, and then it was able to show how these communities, maybe it's a police force, maybe it's an open source training solution for one police force in Mesa, Arizona. And you're able to then have metrics and reporting on the back end over the last year. And that was trialed, and maybe it was a $500,000 fund that was able to be raised somehow. And this technology was completely open sourced and was not built from within. It was not built for profit. Now, the police force would license it, but the technology itself would have a fabric of open source, developers that are able to then allow it to grow as more of an ecosystem outside only the principles of business. And then you put in metrics and you put in reporting into that to show, tap into the community through AI, what's going on in the community and the progress. And you show that how these things have either been working or not. And if it's not working, then you improve it again. And, there's a lady I follow. Her name is Vivienne Ming, Ming, and she has Socos Labs. I talk about her in almost every episode. I've wanted to get on. I don't know if she'll ever get on, but I'm going to continue to talk about her. I just love her thoughts because she builds artificial intelligence, which she called Augmented Intelligence, which is important because, and she builds these technologies to help. She built something called Guild, where they were able to then more effectively align people looking for work with employers based off of predictive behaviors of things they've contributed to. And, if we were able to build these technologies that had a better understanding, and then if you can build it to understand, you can also build it to have a ability of how it's doing and report back in the community. And, that's really the emergence right there. That's the plan of how I want to travel the world in the future and find these things and fight for them. And one of them might be a real small little thing. Could be a guy freaking in his basement in his underwear building something. And I find it and it's like them. And then there's a provider over here that can use the dude that just built it in his underwear. Once you try it, it's like, okay, I'll try it. And then reporting and it works. And, it's those small things. It's not going to be me going to Microsoft and trying to convince Microsoft to build something. That's going to be impossible. But if Microsoft comes across finding things that are actually working to improve their customer relations and dealing with their customer support, and they find it, and it's an outsourced solution that is organically able to grow from the community, they can license. Yeah, maybe that'll take 10 years, but that's the idea of the emergence, to really dig deep, find these technologies that reside inside ourselves and our communities, and to grow them outside of only the profit model. That's where I think it's called what WTF happened in the 1970s.com. There's all this reporting of what's happened. Literally, that is the website, WTF. So what the fuck happened in the 1970s.com. And it will show you all this reporting of what's happened since the 70s on the separation of the wealth gap. And it's basically, this whole shareholder primacy deal where it's just driving for profits as opposed to the quality of the experience. And my thing is, I think we're going to continue to see that chart continue to grow, climb and climb and climb. And what happens when we're separated, when this wealth gap increases? There's more dissonance, there's more anger. And then when you've got a centralized information connection that's playing off of that, playing off of those behaviors and all the problems, and you should be upset and you should be pissed and one side or the other, then we got to break that chain. We got to break that chain. I'm going to spend the rest of my life fighting for that. And, I don't have much traction yet, but I've got some traction. So I'm going to put it on snowshoes and freaking get to work.
Well, Paul, I am very excited, to be honest, that you've got your podcast launched and you're out here doing this. Somebody's got to do it. I know there's some other folks out and about, and just making an awareness and putting a spark in the minds of other, people who are brilliant people who are just sitting around, who haven't been able to even have the time to start to ponder on these types of things. Just getting the information out there is the start. Just throwing some ideas out, and it's just planting seeds, and they will grow.
Yeah, and I've when I look at my analytics on my podcast, I see I've got a little bit of a community growing in India, believe it or not. Proportionate to the United States, it's it's not as big, but it's more than all the other countries. So, to the audience out there, anybody that knows anyone that could contribute to some of these ideas, that's innovating, that's anything, I'll talk to anybody. I really will. And you share resources with me of interesting things that are going on, I will share it. And by the way, with Tim, with you, I'm going to share your drug money resources and things like that, because I want people to discover your music. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you.
Yep. So, I really appreciate
that. Thank you so much.
Yep. So really, this is what it's all about, is really just, getting in, digging deep, just really digging for it. And that's the kind of the metaphor I use is a shovel. We all need better shovels for us to be able to dig for the truth and dig for our own better realities. And I don't want to buy the shovel from Walmart. I want to be a part of the one to make it myself, and my community can help me make it. And that's ultimately where we need to be, in my opinion. I mean, I may be wrong, but it's taken me a long time to actually, because back in the day, I didn't have the clarity of what this actually was. And that's what I think led to the problems with Quired, is I was just chasing something. And finally, Sharon got me into the point of meditating, and really, because I'd always tell her, it's like, I know I'm going to do something, but I just don't know what it is. And she goes, you need to meditate and find the flow and let it take you there. And I thought it was nonsense. And then it just, it took me a year or two, and then it just came with the Emergence. I found that book in a bookstore and just happened across it, and it's like, damn. So, that's what I'm fighting for. I finally found it. So, let's just keep on moving it forward. And, you discover anything else on your side that's things interesting, and we'll work on our word explorer thing. Like I told the people in Virginia that I need to just basically launch this and find people that are interested in these things. And Lord knows, maybe we'll build something eventually together.
Yeah, absolutely. I will share anything I find. We'll keep working on things. yeah, I'm really excited for you. I know you've been searching for this for a long time, and so far I think it's going really well. So just keep pushing, keep fighting for it, and we'll see what comes to the surface.
Yep, that's it. Cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come on the Emergence, and always love talking to you. It's always a joy to be able to talk to you, and I'm going to physically see you. We've been promising that for a while, so it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon.
All right, Paul, that goes both ways, and I would definitely love to see you soon. So let's talk sometime soon and figure out when we can do that.
All right, man. Well, thanks again, and I'll just talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.
Okay. All right, bye.